joyous voices of an evangelical congregation in Ethiopia. But the people in this large church hall, with their faces and palms turned towards heaven, aren't Ethiopian. They're refugees from Eritrea, many of whom have fled their homeland because of religious persecution. He's just pulling up his trouser legs to show me his shins, and there's huge scars across the front of his legs, huge discoloration, and then in the centre, the white scar tissue. What happened here? Is that from your beating?
Yeah.
Let's just stop. Take a minute. Take a minute. Yeah. A 35-year-old man sits weeping in front of me. I'll call him Gedeon because I can't use his real name. He was once an evangelical church minister in Eritrea. Now he scrapes a living fixing cars here in Ethiopia. In 2002, Gedeon was arrested during a raid on a church service and for more than 9 months held in a military prison in southern Eritrea.
He's saying that the scars that you showed us just now are the points where he was squeezing it out so that the pus would come out, because that's where the severe infection was, because they wouldn't give him any medicines, and it felt as if every bone was broken. It was bleeding very badly, and it was very painful.
You were treating yourself with those wounds?
Somebody gave him salt, so he was washing it with salt as well, and that's all he could do. But the other prison officers were mocking him, saying, why don't you just sign that paper and go from here, because otherwise you're going to lose your legs.
That piece of paper his prison guards taunted him with was a statement recanting his faith. But Gedeon remained defiant, even to the point of scribbling extracts from the Bible on tissue paper and smuggling it to the other prisoners. When his crime was discovered, Gedeon was tied up and thrown into a tiny dark cell.
At that point, after 2 months, the head of the division came and demanded that he changed his mind about his decision. When he refused, how they tied him, they made it tighter, and they took him outside. He says they took him outside. They gathered all the prisoners, around 700 prisoners in the camp at the time, and every time I refused, they would beat me up. The rope was so tight, he couldn't even defend himself because his hands were tied, and the beatings got more severe. He was getting weaker, and he was bleeding from his mouth, from his nose, and he thought he was going to die. So he started praying, and they could hear him praying, and he prayed for forgiveness for them. And then after that, he lost consciousness. He says they left him for dead. They only stopped because they thought he was dead.
The persecution of Eritrea's small religious groups began in 1994, shortly after the country won its independence. The government, which grew out of a Marxist rebel group, the EPLF, turned first on the Jehovah's Witnesses. They lost their citizenship, and many were jailed for refusing to carry out military service. Then in 2002, the government announced it would recognise only 4 official faiths: the Orthodox, the Catholic, the Lutheran and Islam, effectively outlawing the rest. It was the start of a systematic operation against minority Christian churches, in particular the evangelical and Pentecostal movements. Weddings, baptisms, prayer meetings and church services, none were safe from the security forces. This is a story that's so sensitive I can't report it for the BBC within Eritrea itself for fear of endangering the people I talk to. Instead, I'm meeting refugees over the border in Ethiopia. Well, the sun's just come up to reveal the most stunning scenery. As far as the eye can see, there are rolling green hills and valleys. It's just beautiful. This is the province of Tigray, up in the north of the country, and we've been driving for hours along a red clay road. Our destination is Shemelba, the refugee camp that's home to thousands of Eritreans. Well, this is it. This is Shemelba. This refugee camp is home to about 15,000 Eritreans. It doesn't have the feeling of being crowded, though. There are neat rows of mud brick houses with thatched roofs and plastic sheeting stretched out over them. As you can hear, there's also a vibrant church service in full flow. And I'm being taken to a large building, which is the Ebenezer Evangelical Church, to see them worship in a way that they simply wouldn't be allowed to do back in Eritrea.
Tanya, this is Samuel. He came to Shemelba three days ago.
3 days ago?
Yeah.
OK. Please, Samuel, sit down.
Okay, thank you.
In a room belonging to one of the elders, I meet Samuel, which is not his real name. He's 24 years old and university educated. Samuel is an evangelical Christian, or as he prefers to call himself, a spiritual. In March 2005, Samuel attended the wedding of a friend.
The soldiers first came and they surrounded the church. They trapped and they have come with a police car. And
How many of you were there at this wedding reception?
the spiritualists were about 30 people. There were about 30 spiritualists.
What did the soldiers and the police do?
They told us, the spiritualists, all of you stand up and get on the pickup, they said us.
To get in the truck, the pickup truck?
Yeah.
Samuel, along with 19 other members of the wedding party, was taken to a police station where they were arrested and detained for 2 weeks. Then they were taken en masse to a jail.
It looks like a grave.
A grave?
Yeah,
Why did it look like a grave?
because, there is no chance to move freely. It is a prison full of darkness. If you want to piss or if you want to defecate, they will tell you, just piss it where you are or defecate it where you are.
Samuel, what was going through your head when they took you to this prison?
Stress and depression. You cannot understand. You think as you are dreaming. What is it? Is it prison? Am I really Samuel? Am I? But, being as a spiritual, there is power. God comforts you.
After 2 months, Samuel and his fellow wedding party prisoners were moved again, this time to another jail where conditions were far worse. He would spend 4 months here, forced to do back-breaking manual labour. Malnourished and very weak, Samuel says the pressure on him to recant his faith never subsided.
Would you like to leave it? They ask you. Would you like to leave it this night?
Would you like
again?
to leave your faith?
Yeah,
Every day they asked you.
Every night. These 4 months especially.
Did some of your friends leave it?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Because of the beating of the sticks, the clubs.
How many times were you beaten, do you think, Samuel?
I have been beaten for, if you count it, day by day, for about 60 days, I have been beaten. Not only that, do you know Christ being crucified in the cross? I have been hanged on the tree.
They hung you in the form of a crucifix on a tree?
Yes. My hand is being tied with the rope, and my hand is being connected with that rope. They pulled up it, and
You were lifted up from the ground because of this rope.
and without touching the ground.
So there was no support for your feet. You were
Yeah.
just lifted by your wrists.
Yeah. Of course.
Other refugees described similar stories of torture. With me in the refugee camp was a British woman of Eritrean origin, Selam-Betenna, who translated the refugees' stories for me. She works for an NGO called Release Eritrea, publicising religious persecution there. But even she was shocked by what we'd been hearing.
We continually report about tortures, there's this term that we say like extreme anxiety over the treatment in prisons. But when you actually see somebody sat in front of you and tell you that this has happened to them 60 times, it doesn't compare to knowing about these things. I mean, these people we were talking to were talking about experiences over and above the torture, the beating, the denial of food, the underground cells. The one consistent thing that people had told us is that this was the norm. A jail isn't a jail if these things didn't happen.
In 2004, the Eritrean government turned its attention to the Orthodox Church, one of the oldest Christian churches in the world. That intoxicating singing you can hear is coming from about 200 Orthodox priests gathered outside a church along with a big crowd. I've arrived in the holy town of Aksum, and it looks like I've stumbled across a huge welcoming party. The Ethiopian Orthodox Pope, known here as the Patriarch, is visiting town. And as I look around, I feel like I've gone back about 2,000 years. Priests wear long black cloaks and white turbans. Some carry velvet ornamental umbrellas. Others sway in religious ecstasy. What's more, it's this very church that's reputed to contain the Ark of the Covenant. All this ceremony, though, is a far cry from the circumstances surrounding the Patriarch of the Eritrean Orthodox Church. Almost 2 years ago, he was placed under house arrest by the Eritrean government, and today, no one's certain about his whereabouts. Salam, we weren't expecting to come across this today, were we?
Not in my wildest dreams would I have expected to stumble into something like this. This is certainly once in a lifetime chance to actually be in Aksum and to bump into the Patriarch. I've seen him blessing children, I've seen him blessing newlywed. It's amazing. It couldn't be more different from the situation of the Patriarch of the Eritrean Orthodox Church.
Tell me more about the Eritrean Patriarch.
He's an 80-year-old man. He's got severe diabetes. We don't know about his medical condition or whether he's getting enough medication. We don't know any other situation about his health or his well-being or even for certain his whereabouts.
Gerald Gotson, an English missionary, knows the Eritrean Patriarch well. He told me about a journey deep into the countryside he'd once taken with his old friend, Abune Antonios, when he was still just a bishop.
I saw young people riding donkeys and older men being helped by other young people. And it was a tremendous sight because not only hundreds of people flocked at this sunset hour, but I would estimate thousands, and they all wanted to see and hear the bishop.
He seemed very loved to you.
Yes, I have a great, not only a great respect for him, a great love for him, because he was so personal, he was so friendly, and I would say he was a gentleman, but a great scholar, a great biblical scholar, and a man of courage and holiness.
Can you describe what the Patriarch looks like physically?
He's a tall man, and although he's now nearly 80, he's very good looking. But when you meet him, you are immediately impressed by his dignity, and you are in the presence of a saint.
Last year, Pastor Gotson tried to personally intervene on his friend's behalf when he ran into the Eritrean president, Isaias Afwerki, at a hotel on the coast.
At first he was very friendly, and then I said very politely, "Mr. President, would you kindly give me permission to see the Patriarch?" At that moment, his attitude changed, and he was very angry, and accused me of interfering in the affairs of state, and he just walked away from me. And when he left, I just stood in the restaurant, and I said to myself, "Oh my God, what have I done? What have I said?"
Gerald Gotson was imprisoned for 4 days. On his release, he was driven straight to the airport. He's in no doubt that what happened to him was due to his request to see the elderly patriarch. Meanwhile, there's a growing campaign to raise awareness about the plight of Abune Antonios. One of its leaders in London is Abba Seraphim, the head of the British Orthodox Church. He told me that the patriarch had been placed under arrest for refusing to do the government's bidding when security forces rounded up members of a spiritual renewal movement within the Orthodox Church.
He was not prepared to condemn priests who were accused of being anti-government and various false accusations. He was very angry when they were imprisoned. He wasn't prepared to excommunicate them as the government wanted him to. So they removed gradually him from the exercise of power. And he was just allowed to do ceremonial functions only.
Well, there are rumours that the Eritrean government say he was unfit for office.
Well, but we're talking about just about a year after he was enthroned. And so he was unfit for office because he wouldn't toe the line.
Do you know how he reacted to this? Do you have any personal reports about...
No, we don't. Well, the only thing we've heard is that he has complained that he's being kept in a darkened room.
Darkened room, that's what you've heard.
That was what he managed to get a message to somebody complaining about this.
5 months ago, the Eritrean government installed what Abba Seraphim describes as a false patriarch, a new head of the church, with the support of some Eritrean bishops. But the new patriarch is not recognised by the spiritual head of the Coptic church. Abune Antonios, meanwhile, remains at an undisclosed location, and a number of Orthodox church leaders have been jailed. Their persecution, though, does not compare with what's happening to Eritrea's evangelical Christians. So did the Orthodox Church initially abandon the evangelicals to their fate before finding themselves under attack?
They probably didn't show enough solidarity with fellow Christians. There wasn't a great outpouring, a denunciation of this. So, yes, I think that perhaps... I did hear on one occasion that one of the Catholic bishops had sort of warned, they picked off the Jehovah's Witnesses, they picked off the evangelicals, one of us will be next.
In just under 15 years, the Eritrean government has turned on what it believes to be American-backed churches and then on the leadership of the Orthodox Church. The country's Muslims have also been caught up in this hostility to religion. Many have been imprisoned on suspicion of being linked to opposition groups. The current government of President Afewerki emerged from a Marxist liberation ideology which had always shown a distrust of religion, yet initially seemed to tolerate most faiths. So why did it step up its persecution of different churches? Here's Michaela Wrong, the author of A History of Eritrea.
There has been a slow and steady progression in this hostility towards religion. When the PFDJ first seized control of Asmara and started running the country, there was a certain tolerance of alternative voices, alternative views, independent opinions. And I think what you've seen is a very steady whittling away of that. Isaias Afewerki has basically strengthened his hold on the country, and we really have drifted now into the area of a totalitarian state. And so if you look at all the areas from which independent, challenging thought that might represent a threat to the state normally come, there are no independent newspapers in Eritrea anymore. There's no independent television or radio station. The university has been closed. It's a control-freak party. It needs to control every avenue of potential thought.
Yet according to Germa Asmaron, one of Eritrea's ambassadors in Europe, every Eritrean is free to believe in any faith that he or she holds. He told the BBC that although Eritrea only recognises its 4 oldest faiths, it's not true that the others have been outlawed. They have simply been asked to register their finances.
Religion has become now, a business. If you go to the United States, the so-called evangelical Christians are now funding even political parties. They have become dominant. So that is not what we are accepting, because we are a country where there is zero tolerance for any arrogance, bigotry, division, be it ethnic or be it religious, be it tribal.
Do you accept that there's been a brutal government campaign to wipe out evangelical and Pentecostal Christianity from Eritrea?
absolutely, this is pure fabrication. There is a campaign by all these forces because they are very powerful, you know.
But do you deny, Ambassador, that weddings and baptisms, prayer meetings have been raided by security forces?
That's not true. It is all fabrication. I mean, if you know our culture, wedding means a serious business. People should question, who are these souls? Who are these guys?
I've talked to someone who claimed he was arrested at a wedding and then he was detained without charge for a year in prison.
Where does this guy live?
He's now a refugee from Eritrea.
Nowadays, check any refugee all over the world. How does he get his refugee status? Either he has to claim political activity or religious persecution. This is a certificate. It's like a passport nowadays.
As for the patriarch, I asked the ambassador outright if Abune Antonios was still alive.
He's not only alive, he's kicking and praying, because I don't know why you're asking me.
Because no one's heard from him since May of this year.
I think maybe a lot of people don't know, how the monks serve. These are monks which has said, I am sick and tired of the worldly life. The heavenly life is very important, so they live in monasteries and other places. I am 100% sure nothing has happened because he has not committed any crime.
So the Eritrean ambassador denies all the allegations made by the people I met in Ethiopia and the UK. But stories continue to emerge from this increasingly closed country that paint a very different picture to his version of events. A Christian living in Eritrea sent me an email. In it he wrote, "The situation in Eritrea is getting worse and worse after the president stated that America is funding the Pentecostal church in Eritrea. Many Christians are suffering in military concentrations and police stations, suffering for only their faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. Pray for the Christians in Eritrea," he wrote, "and pray for the prisoners and their families."